You wake slowly, the sea breeze brushing against your cheeks even before you step outside. It's not really morning, not in the sense your modern clock would insist, but more a gentle unfolding of light across a sky that seems to have forgotten the hurry of time. The deck beneath your feet creaks softly with each shift of weight, a steady companion to your thoughts. You probably won't make it through this day, and that's perfectly fine. You're not meant to conquer anything, just to float along history's gentle current. If you like drifting through quiet stories like this one, consider giving a soft thumbs up and maybe subscribing in case you want to come back for another journey like this. And while we wander, leave a comment. Where are you right now? And what's your local time? It is oddly satisfying to know someone else is breathing in a different corner of the world while you are here. Now let's ease into tonight's journey, into the salty scent of the ocean and the nervous murmurs of a crew that hasn't yet seen the sun rise over the Atlantic. The year is 1740. You are aboard the HMS Sapphire, a medium-sized British naval vessel, somewhere off the coast of West Africa. Your stomach rumbles, though you're not particularly hungry. There's a lingering fear that anything too fresh might betray you. Fresh fruit in particular is a dangerous temptation. You glance at the oranges piled in the hold, their skins dimpled and fragrant. The captain has warned repeatedly, this is no exaggeration, that consuming them without careful preparation could lead to illness, a perilous condition known in hushed whispers as scurvy. Historians still debate whether the sailors' fear of fresh fruit was more superstition than science, but you, like them, feel an instinctive caution. Around you, the ship hums with life. Men with sun-roughened faces swing ropes, their muscles moving in a rhythm as natural as breathing as they adjust the sails. You hear the subtle swish of water against the hull, a constant hypnotic pulse that seems to sync with your own heartbeat. One of the sailors hums a tune that could be from a tavern in Portsmouth or a dream you almost remember. The notes are slightly off-key, which somehow makes them comforting. Curious tidbit. Sailors sometimes believe that sneezing overboard could summon rain or anger the sea gods. You raise an eyebrow at that, wondering whether superstition was just their way of passing the long hours between rum rations. The galley smells faintly of salted meat, hard biscuits, and the faint tang of citrus, the forbidden fruit teasing your senses from its netted crate. You might wander closer, imagining the zestiness of an orange as a luxury your ancestors wouldn't dare indulge. Remember the deck you just stepped onto? Its creak under your weight reminds you that everything moves slowly here, deliberately. A world apart from the constant notifications and hurried mornings you left behind. The captain's voice, clipped but not unkind, drifts from the quarterdeck. Keep hands off until tomorrow. Tomorrow, of course, is a vague, sleepy promise that may never come, and you feel an odd mix of frustration and relief. You sit near the rail, the sun beginning to tip over the horizon. The breeze smells faintly of salt, sweat, and wood polish. A gull passes overhead, its cries distant, philosophical even, as if it's mocking your earthly concerns. You close your eyes for a moment, and it's easy to imagine the ship as a cocoon, isolated from time, floating between yesterday and tomorrow. You might drift into a nap here, lulled by the rocking of the deck and the gentle squabble of the crew. And there's a small obscure fact to tuck into your mind like a bookmark. Sailors used to chew on dried lime peels as a precaution against scurvy, a practice that often left their mouths puckered and slightly foamy. You chuckle quietly, imagining this sour defense against the world, a citrus armor against unseen decay. You let your hand trail along the railing, feeling the grain of the wood beneath your fingers, and whisper to yourself, the sea is patient, time is patient, and tonight, as always, you are neither quite here nor quite anywhere else. You rise again, or perhaps you've never fully sat. There's a certain ambiguity here, a soft haze that might be morning, might be something else entirely. The ship rocks gently, a lullaby in 3/4 time. You breathe in the scent of brine and cedar, and for a moment you forget that land exists beyond the horizon. There's a slow, comforting certainty in the creak of timbers, the distant chatter of the men, and the occasional squeak of a pulley overhead. A fellow sailor ambles past, his boots scuffing the deck as if he's rehearsing for a play that will never open. He tips his hat in your direction, a lazy acknowledgement of your shared exile. You probably won't notice it now, but the way he carries a small charm, a carved wooden fish dangling from his belt, is an old superstition meant to calm storms. Oddly, you feel the tiniest bit reassured. Below deck the air is warmer, thick with the smell of dried cod and molasses. You remember the orange crate from earlier, a tempting pile of forbidden fruit, and shiver at the collective caution it inspired among the crew. Scurvy, That slow and silent thief had haunted these sailors' minds, leaving them wary of vitamins and citrus alike. In the 18th century, fresh fruit wasn't a treat. It was a gamble with your life. Historians still debate whether scurvy was feared because of the fruit itself or the uncertainty of how to treat it properly, a question that haunts you like the smell of a half-forgotten spice. You wander toward the mast, your fingers brushing the ropes that coil like lazy snakes. A light drizzle begins to mist the deck, a teasing reminder that the sea is never completely still. Sailors often believe that seeing a single white feather in the morning wind could predict storms, a superstition that feels almost like poetry now, but was deadly serious then. You laugh softly, imagining a committee of men debating cloud shapes as if they were stock prices. The horizon shimmers in a peculiar silvered light, and you notice the way the water folds into itself. Each wave a small sighing wavelet that seems to echo the collective exhaustion of this drifting crew. Your stomach rumbles again, reminding you of the long-forgotten orange. Or maybe it's just the salted meat digesting too slowly, a culinary metaphor for patience. In the galley, the cook is humming a tune, one you swear you recognize from a tavern near London. He slices a lemon with precise, almost reverent care, the knife whispering against the fruit's skin. It's a minor act of rebellion, the slightest crack in the fortress of fear built around citrus. You watch the thin arcs of juice catch the morning light, thinking that perhaps danger can be beautiful. There's a small, almost ridiculous detail to notice. Sailors occasionally believe that placing a coin under a lemon slice could ward off bad luck. You wonder if anyone ever tested it, or if it was just another way to pass long, tedious hours. The wind carries a new scent, a faint tang of seaweed and something sharper, coppery, perhaps the smell of the ship's nails in the salt water. You lean against the railing and let your mind drift, remembering the orange crate from earlier, imagining the puckered mouths of sailors chewing lime peels, and feeling oddly comforted by the absurd caution that once dominated lives. You hear the faintest laugh, or perhaps it's the gull again. Either way, it's enough to remind you that life aboard a ship, however strange and cautious, was full of moments small and human. A wink, a whispered superstition, the deliberate step of a man carrying his wooden fish charm. The day stretches lazily ahead, infinite yet contained within the gentle creaking frame of the HMS Sapphire. And you, like them, are just along for the ride, suspended between a world of salt, superstition, and the quiet, ironic poetry of human caution. You notice, almost subconsciously, the rhythm of the crew as they move about the deck. It's hypnotic, like watching a line of ants carefully negotiating a dropped breadcrumb, only larger and wetter. The sails flap softly, snapping once or twice, a sound that could be alarming if you weren't already enveloped in this slow maritime lullaby. You probably won't even register the flap as dangerous. Your mind is too occupied with the small absurdities of life aboard a vessel that seems both enormous and claustrophobically confined. The sun rises higher, spreading its pale gold across the canvas of sails, and you feel the warmth on your skin. A deckhand passes by with a bucket, water sloshing lazily, his boots squeaking on wet planks. There's a rhythm to these sounds, and you let yourself sink into it, appreciating the ordinary music of a working ship. Somewhere, a tin cup clinks against a wooden table below deck, and you imagine it echoing through the air like a tiny bell tolling for patience. You wander closer to the galley, where a peculiar smell lingers, almost imperceptible, like the whisper of an old market stall tucked away in a distant port. Sailors have long feared the unpredictable behavior of fresh produce, but you can't help noticing that even the faintest aroma can stir the mind, teasing memories of land you may have never visited. Historians still debate whether the preventive measures against scurvy were more effective than pure luck, or perhaps both, like a dice roll weighted by hope and fear. A curious, obscure habit comes to mind. Sailors would sometimes collect bits of old bread and let them mold intentionally, believing that the fungus might ward off certain illnesses. You squint, half convinced they might be onto something, half convinced they were just trying to entertain themselves in the most inconvenient way possible. Life, after all, is always a mix of reason and whimsy, particularly on a floating prison of wood and salt. The horizon is oddly still today, the waves rolling lazily like molten glass, reflecting the sky in quiet shades of blue and gray. You run a hand over the railing, remembering how the deck creaked under your feet hours ago, how the orange crate tempted and terrified in equal measure. Everything seems connected. The sway of the ship, the scent of citrus, the soft murmur of a crew lost in their routines. You hear a faint argument, or perhaps it's a negotiation between two sailors about who gets the last dried fig. The tone is polite, almost absurdly civilized, considering the rough, sunburned hands involved. There is something gentle in this minor tension. A reminder that human nature persists even when fear of illness and superstition rules your days. And now a small irony. You notice that the ship's log, meticulously kept by a bored midshipman, records the temperature and wind direction with the same intensity that modern social media tracks trending memes. Historians still debate whether these logs were more about survival or simply the irresistible lure of creating something official to stave off boredom. You smile at the thought, imagining the midshipman sighing, quill poised as the sun drips lazily across the deck. Below, the cook is slicing a few stubborn limes, their aroma rising faintly, almost rebellious. You watch him move, a soft hum accompanying each precise cut, and feel that odd mixture of admiration and relief. Here, life continues in small, deliberate ways, curing, slicing, chewing, avoiding danger, laughing softly at the absurdities that stack up like barrels in the hold. You close your eyes for a moment and let the sun warm your face, letting the mundane poetry of maritime life settle into your bones. The gulls circle lazily overhead, their cries merging with the creak of ropes and the soft slap of waves. You realize that even the smallest movements, the tilt of a sail, the scuff of a boot, the drip of water from the rigging, form a lullaby, a rhythm meant to soothe both body and mind. And so you drift, suspended between the absurd and the necessary, the feared and the mundane, floating on history's vast gentle current. You lean against the rail, letting your fingers trace the grain of the polished wood. There's a patience here that feels almost cruel when compared to modern life, the way the ship demands stillness, observation, and careful consideration. You probably won't feel like rushing, and if you do, the Atlantic will remind you gently but firmly that speed is overrated. The crew moves around you, each man absorbed in his own ritual. One is mending a sail, the needle passing through heavy canvas like it's stitching together fragments of a dream. Another polishes a cannon with the precision of someone rehearsing a dance, though there's no music other than the wind and the distant slap of waves. It's hypnotic, comforting, and just a touch absurd. Almost like watching a slow-motion documentary directed by a mildly sarcastic god. You remember the orange crate, tucked safely below deck, and a faint shiver passes over you. The fear of scurvy persists, almost a ghostly companion on every voyage. Fresh fruit is both treasure and menace, a paradox your ancestors navigated daily. Historians still debate whether sailors' obsessive caution was rooted in genuine knowledge, superstition, or the general discomfort of confronting something unpredictable in an otherwise regimented life. A small peculiar tradition drifts into your mind. Sailors believed that drawing little faces on their citrus fruit could appease the spirits of the fruit, ensuring it wouldn't bring sickness. You smile at the image, a dozen grimacing oranges, each more annoyed than the last, dangling in netting as though protesting their fate. Absurd, yet oddly endearing. The wind shifts, carrying a mixture of sea spray and something sharper, metallic, a reminder that the ship's iron and wood age together in quiet coexistence. You notice a sailor tossing a coin into the water, muttering a half-hearted prayer for calm seas. The gesture feels both necessary and ridiculous, a human tic that persists even in the face of overwhelming indifference from nature. Below deck, the cook slices another lime with precise care. You watch the juice bead on the counter, tiny suns trapped in liquid amber. One of the younger sailors peeks around the corner, eyes wide, and you almost laugh at his cautious admiration. Here, life is measured in small victories and tiny rebellions. Citrus conquered without consequence, a perfectly polished deck, a wave successfully avoided. A subtle fact. Sailors sometimes believe that sleeping with a piece of dried orange peel under their pillow would bring pleasant dreams, or at least prevent nightmares of scurvy. You nod thoughtfully, appreciating the gentle absurdity of such customs. You stroll slowly toward the bow, letting the spray mist your face. The horizon is a lazy, wavering line, perfectly indifferent to your small human concerns. You feel the gentle rocking of the vessel in your chest, a soft heartbeat that syncs with your own. The gulls circle, calling out in tones that sound suspiciously like sarcasm, as if they're the maritime critics of this slow-moving play. The day stretches like taffy, each hour thick and pliable. You notice the midshipman scratching in his logbook again, documenting a wind shift with the same solemnity as a modern weather app, a quiet testament to human persistence and mild obsession. Life aboard the HMS Sapphire is a mix of necessity and ritual, absurdity and discipline, fear and small delight, and you find yourself breathing in the rhythm of it all, allowing each moment to settle slowly into the marrow of your thoughts. The sun dips slightly, casting a reflective shimmer across the water, and you feel the day begin to fold in on itself. The orange crate, the humming cook, the creaking deck, all come together in a slow, continuous lullaby, You inhale the scent of salt and wood and a faint, daring hint of citrus, and you realize time aboard this ship is both infinite and impossibly delicate, a floating meditation on human life, fear, and the occasional thrill of disobeying a captain's warning. You linger at the bow, letting the wind tug gently at your hair, and notice how the waves fold into themselves with a soft, deliberate grace. Each ripple seems to echo the careful routines of the sailors you've observed, a rope coiled just so, a sail stitched with infinite patience, a kettle swaying on the galley stove. You probably won't even mind the minor discomfort of salt stinging your eyes because there's a serenity here that blankets all inconvenience. A sailor passes carrying a crate of salted herring. The smell rises in gentle waves, mingling with the tang of citrus from below deck, and you almost giggle at the absurdity of it. Pungent fish and forbidden oranges side by side like stubborn siblings. You recall how the sailors chewed dried lime peels to fend off scurvy, their mouths puckered like tiny war zones against disease. Historians still debate whether this actually helped, or if the lime peels were more of a placebo, a chewable comfort in a world ruled by uncertainty. You wander closer to the mainmast, fingers tracing the coarse rope as if reading braille. The ship creaks in reply, each groan a quiet conversation with the wood beneath your feet. There's a rhythm to life here, and you find yourself slipping into it, unconsciously matching the slow sway of the vessel with your own breathing. The sun glints off a wet deck plank, catching your eye with a small private sparkle, as though the universe has tucked a tiny treasure into an ordinary moment. A curious custom floats into your mind. Sailors sometimes believe that painting little eyes on their barrels of rum would keep mischievous spirits at bay. You imagine the barrel staring back at you, silent and judgmental, and the absurdity feels almost comforting, a reminder that even in fear, humor finds its way. The cook reappears, juggling a lemon and a small knife with surprising grace. He hums a tune that reminds you faintly of a street performer you once passed in London. You wonder if the tune traveled across oceans in a sailor's memory, or if music, like superstition, drifts randomly, touching lives in unpredictable ways. Looking toward the horizon, you notice a subtle shimmer, a glint of sunlight catching the crests of distant waves. It's a slow, meditative sight, as if the sea itself is breathing, inhaling and exhaling around the ship. You run your hand along the railing again, remembering the orange crate tucked safely below, the small rebellions against fear, and the quiet persistence of life in a world that moves both incredibly slowly and impossibly fast. There's a small, almost ridiculous tradition to note. Sailors occasionally rub citrus juice on their hands to ward off the smell of salt and fish. You imagine a group of men with sticky, fragrant palms looking as solemn as monks performing an ancient ritual. It's a tiny, humanizing detail, a comfort in the midst of a life that could otherwise feel dominated by danger and monotony. The wind carries a faint laugh, or perhaps it's the gulls, circling overhead with what seems like mild amusement. You breathe deeply, letting the salt air fill your lungs, and feel the soft, steady pull of the ship beneath your feet. Time drifts around you like a lazy current, and you let yourself be carried along, savoring the absurdities, the small rituals, and the ever-present threat of scurvy that hovers like a shadow over each bright, forbidden fruit below deck. The sun begins its slow descent, casting elongated shadows across the deck, and you sense the day folding into itself. You lean against the railing, listening to the creak of the ship, the distant murmur of the crew, and the rhythmic slap of waves. It's a lullaby of human persistence, minor absurdities, and the gentle, relentless beauty of life afloat in the middle of an indifferent ocean. You notice the shadows stretching across the deck, softening the edges of barrels, ropes, and the familiar orange crate below. There's a calm here, almost philosophical, as though the world is exhaling around you. You probably won't be in any rush, and you're glad for it. The Atlantic has its own timing, a patient rhythm that doesn't care for schedules or deadlines. A sailor sweeps the deck with careful precision, each stroke slow, deliberate, almost meditative. You watch, fascinated by how mundane labor transforms into a quiet poetry when observed without urgency. Salt and citrus mingle faintly in the air, a reminder of the crew's constant negotiation between fear and comfort. Chewing lime peels may have kept scurvy at bay, but it also seems to have nurtured an entire culture of small human absurdities. Historians still debate whether the obsession with citrus was driven more by necessity or by a shared narrative that eased the monotony of long voyages. Below deck, the cook slices another stubborn lime, careful not to waste a drop of juice. You watch the droplets catch the dim light, each one a tiny sun, suspended for a moment before slipping into a shallow pan. There's a rhythm to these motions, a quiet insistence on order amid the unpredictability of the sea. You imagine the smell of citrus mixing with the salt and molasses, a fragrant reminder of how life continues even under strict superstition and subtle fear. A small whimsical tradition drifts into your mind. Some sailors kept tiny notes tucked inside orange peels, messages for the future, or perhaps just idle musings to amuse themselves. You almost wish you could open one now, wondering what a sailor from 1740 might have written about this slow sunlit afternoon. The horizon glows faintly, waves rolling lazily, reflecting clouds like streaks of silver paint. You run your hand along the railing again, remembering the earlier creak under your own feet. The deck seems to breathe with you, a living, patient entity that humors your presence. You hear a distant laugh, perhaps from the crew, perhaps the gulls, who seem increasingly like sarcastic commentators of this gentle absurdity. You notice the midshipman hunched over the logbook, quill moving slowly as he records wind direction, temperature, and the occasional observation of gull behavior. There's a quiet obsession here, a small triumph of order in a world dominated by uncertainty. The meticulous care is oddly comforting, and you allow yourself to imagine that the world is safe, at least for this suspended moment. An obscure habit surfaces in your thoughts. Sailors sometimes whispered to lemons before slicing them, a superstition meant to calm the fruit's supposed malicious spirit. You smile at the image of the tiny, angry citrus and the men tiptoeing around them as if negotiating with stubborn, pucker-faced deities. The absurdity is endearing, a tiny crack of humor in a life that could otherwise feel heavy with monotony and caution. The sun drifts lower, softening the sea into a gentle shimmer. You breathe in the salt air, the faint tang of citrus, the warmth of wood and human labor, and let the rhythm of the ship settle into your bones. Everything, creaking timbers, soft footsteps, distant chatter, forms a slow meditative chorus. You lean back, eyes tracing the horizon, and realize that life aboard this ship is not just survival, but a careful orchestration of small delights, minor rebellions, and quiet endurance. The gulls call overhead almost playfully, and you watch the sunlight dance on the water, letting it lull you into a gentle, contemplative stillness. The day moves slowly without urgency, and you let yourself drift along with it, absorbed in the small absurdities, the persistent superstitions, and the strangely comforting threat of scurvy that reminds you just how delicate and how remarkable this suspended life truly is. You lean quietly against the rail, feeling the salt-laden wind tease your hair and tug gently at the edges of your coat. The sun has dipped further, sending long, sleepy shadows across the deck that seem to stretch with purpose, almost conscious of their own laziness. You probably won't even notice how your own shadow mingles with the worn lines of rope, the coiled nets, and the ever-present orange crate below deck, but it's there, quietly merging you with the rhythm of this vessel. A sailor passes by, carrying a bucket of seawater that sloshes softly, whispering against the sides of the wooden pail. You catch a faint smile from him, one that acknowledges your silent company without needing words. It's a small human connection, ephemeral yet grounding in the infinite monotony of the sea. The smell of citrus drifts up again, teasing your senses, and you remember the soft, puckering faces of sailors chewing lime peels as a talisman against scurvy. Historians still debate whether these rituals were life-saving measures or just inventive ways to keep men busy and slightly less miserable. You wander toward the galley, where the cook is stirring a pot of thin broth with meticulous care, his every motion deliberate, almost ceremonial. There's a quiet humor in imagining that something as mundane as stirring soup could carry cosmic significance in the minds of men so long removed from land. You catch the faintest glimmer of sunlight on a knife blade, a flash of brilliance that contrasts with the dull monotone of salted meat and hard biscuits. A strange and charming custom floats into your mind. Sailors often kept tiny folded slips of paper inside their oranges, messages to themselves or their companions, a kind of citrus-based correspondence. You imagine opening one, wondering what worries or jokes a man in 1740 might have tucked into the rind of a lime. Perhaps it read, "Do not eat me lest your gums revolt." The absurdity is oddly comforting. Above you, the rigging creaks and groans, a slow symphony orchestrated by wind and wood. You hear the faintest argument below deck over the allocation of rations, polite in tone, but edged with a subtle insistence, like men negotiating peace in the middle of a chaotic universe. The sun reflects off the wet deck in patches, glimmering like tiny signals, guiding your wandering thoughts. The gulls circle lazily overhead, their cries echoing across the water, a playful commentary on human preoccupations. You watch them glide effortlessly, imagining that even these winged critics find the obsession with citrus amusing. You lean against the railing, breathing in the combined scents of salt, citrus, and wooden polish, and feel a gentle serenity settle over you, as if the ocean itself were whispering a lullaby meant just for your ears. And now a detail to tickle your imagination. Some sailors believe that licking the condensation of the inside of a citrus crate at night would bring dreams of distant lands. You let the thought drift through your mind, smiling at the prospect of sleep tinged with tropical islands, forbidden fruit, and the quiet laughter of men long gone. You sink back into the rhythm of the ship, the waves, and the slow, deliberate heartbeat of life at sea, letting it carry you into a tranquil kind of meditation. The horizon shifts subtly, the sun now low enough to gild the edges of the sails in honeyed light. You probably won't want to move too quickly, because every step on the deck is cushioned by the soft, almost hypnotic sway of the ship. A faint chill brushes your skin, mingling with the lingering warmth of the afternoon sun. A reminder that life at sea is a perpetual negotiation between comfort and vigilance. You wander near the mainmast, fingers trailing along the rope as though seeking the secrets embedded in its rough, salt-creased fibers. The sailors move around you, each absorbed in personal rituals. One patches a sail, another checks the rigging, a third carefully slices a stubborn lime. The presence of the orange crate below deck is a constant, silent reminder that fear and desire coexist in strange, delicate balance. Historians still debate whether the obsession with citrus was more practical or psychological, a mixture of caution, necessity, and habit forged over years of isolation. A curious custom drifts into your mind. Sailors would sometimes write small notes on scraps of sailcloth, tuck them into citrus rinds, and then pass them along the crew as jokes, warnings, or minor challenges. You imagine peeling open one to read a sailor's sardonic take on life at sea, perhaps a subtle complaint about the monotony of a week without fresh vegetables. It's a tiny act of rebellion, a wink at absurdity, a way to make long voyages a touch more bearable. The smell of salted cod drifts faintly from the galley, mingling with the persistent tang of citrus and the crisp brine of seawater. You inhale deeply, feeling each scent as though it were a note in a symphony composed for senses rather than ears. The deck creaks beneath your weight, a steady, predictable sound that lulls your mind into gentle observation. You notice the midshipman scribbling notes in the logbook again, quill moving with the deliberate care of a man chronicling an epic no one will read. There's a quiet poetry in this devotion to recording wind shifts, temperatures, and occasional gull behavior. It reminds you that even in the most rigidly structured lives, small human rituals, absurd, deliberate, or whimsical, create meaning. An obscure tradition drifts into your awareness. Sailors believe that placing a small piece of citrus under their pillow would ward off nightmares, especially those about sickness, storms, or lost opportunities. You smile, picturing a dozen lime slices lying beneath the heads of exhausted men, each carrying dreams flavored with tang and hope. The gulls cry overhead, their wings cutting slow arcs through the golden light. You watch them glide effortlessly, marveling at their freedom in contrast to the precise, cautious choreography of the crew. Below deck, the cook hums softly, a tune you recognize faintly from somewhere in the past, perhaps a street in London or a distant tavern. The sound floats upward, blending with the rhythm of the waves, the creak of the ship, and the soft laughter of a life lived cautiously yet fully. The day leans toward evening, and the water glows with a faint, silvery sheen. You feel the ship beneath your feet as a living entity, moving slowly, deliberately, and inexplicably gentle. Time stretches, unhurried, and you allow yourself to drift with it, noticing the small absurdities, the persistent superstitions, and the quietly enduring beauty of human life afloat, suspended between ocean and sky. The wind softens, carrying the faint scent of citrus, salt, and polished wood. You lean back against the railing, letting your thoughts drift like tiny ships along the horizon. And for a moment, suspended between the absurd and the essential, you feel an infinite calm, a patient lullaby of life aboard the HMS Sapphire floating gently into twilight. You notice the subtle change in light, how the horizon seems to dissolve into soft streaks of pink and gold, a watercolor painted by the gentle hand of the evening sun. You probably won't feel the urgency to do much. There's no land in sight, no pressing errands, just the deliberate motion of the ship beneath you and the slow whisper of wind across the sails. You take a deep breath, letting the salt and citrus mingle in your lungs, and feel a kind of quiet anticipation, the kind that comes when a day begins to fold into memory. The crew moves in a rhythm you are beginning to recognize as almost hypnotic, the creak of ropes, the soft tap of boots on wet planks, a faint laugh drifting from below deck. Each man is absorbed in his task, whether patching a sail, polishing a cannon, or checking the rigging, all actions performed with a blend of routine and subtle artistry. The orange crate lingers below deck like a dormant volcano, harmless until approached, a curious mixture of allure and caution. Historians still debate whether sailors' fear of fresh fruit was entirely justified, or if their nervous imagination simply gave vitamin C a bad reputation. A peculiar practice floats into your awareness. Sailors would sometimes attach small charms, made of bone or wood, to the ropes they climbed daily, believing it would protect them from falls or misfortune. You imagine a crew of men scurrying up and down, each with their personal talisman, a tiny acknowledgement that the sea demands respect but appreciates humor too. You wander near the rail, watching the waves curl lazily against the hull. Each ripple seems deliberate, like the ocean is rehearsing patience, reminding you that motion and stillness are not opposites, but companions. You catch a faint whiff of molasses from below deck, mixed with the citrus tang and brine, a scent that somehow feels comforting rather than intrusive. The midshipman's quill scratches softly as he records the day's weather, the position of the sun, and occasional observations of passing wildlife. There's a subtle irony here, meticulous records of an ocean that will always remain indifferent. Yet the act itself is a meditation, a way to impose a sense of order on a world that is otherwise unpredictable. A small obscure tradition drifts through your thoughts. Sailors sometimes braided strands of hair into small charms and hid them inside fruit rinds to protect loved ones back home. You imagine the soft faces of oranges and limes, each cradling tiny tokens of affection and superstition. It's absurd, delicate and human, a perfect reflection of life aboard this slow-moving vessel. You feel the sun soften further, casting a glow that seems to linger on every surface, every rope, every weathered hand. The gulls circle lazily above, their cries both haunting and playful, and you let yourself sink into the lullaby of their flight. The ship rocks gently beneath you, a steady heartbeat accompanying the fading light. You close your eyes for a moment and allow the rhythm of sea and crew, citrus and superstition, to lull your mind into a quiet, reflective state, readying you for the subtle darkness that will soon drape across the deck. You notice the first hints of evening mist curling around the bow, softening edges and giving the deck an almost dreamlike glow. You probably won't be moving quickly. Speed feels irrelevant when the horizon itself is a lazy gradient of violet and silver. The air is cooler now, carrying hints of salt, wood polish, and the lingering perfume of citrus. You inhale slowly, letting the mixed scents anchor you in this suspended moment between day and night. A sailor passes carrying a bucket of seawater, the liquid swishing with gentle authority. The rhythm of life aboard the ship continues unabated. Ropes stretch, sails snap softly, boots scuff the planks with predictable cadence. The orange crate below deck sits quietly, a constant reminder of the crew's curious relationship with fresh fruit, both necessary and terrifying. Historians still debate whether the obsessive caution surrounding citrus was truly protective or largely a psychological tool to maintain discipline among the men. A whimsical custom surfaces in your mind. Sailors sometimes drew little faces on lemons and oranges to amuse themselves or ward off imagined curses. You imagine dozens of tiny citrus heads, each pouting or scowling, dangling in netting like a miniature fragrant jury. It's a minor absurdity, yet comforting in the precise way that human rituals often are, especially when layered over fear and monotony. You wander toward the midshipman, who is hunched over the logbook once again, quill scratching gently, documenting the direction of the wind, the motion of the waves, and the occasional presence of seabirds. His dedication is almost comical, a serious chronicle of a world that refuses to bend to human intentions. And yet there's poetry in it, a quiet assertion that humans, no matter how small, will always try to measure and record the vastness around them. The cook hums softly below deck, slicing limes with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of a saint. You remember the sailors' practice of chewing lime peels to prevent scurvy, and imagine the pucker-faced determination required to maintain such rituals. You almost laugh quietly at the absurdity, picturing a dozen men lined up like students in a citrus academy, lips drawn tight against invisible enemies. Above, the gulls circle lazily, their wings cutting arcs through the dimming light. Their cries echo over the water, a subtle commentary on the careful choreography of human life aboard the HMS Sapphire. You lean against the rail, letting the wind carry your thoughts as you watch the sun dip lower, painting the waves with streaks of molten gold and violet. An obscure tradition drifts through your mind. Sailors occasionally whispered secrets to the citrus they carried, believing it would keep them safe from storms or illness. You imagine a half-dozen men murmuring to oranges and lemons, blending superstition with gentle humor, each finding solace in the small invisible protections that make life at sea feel more navigable. The deck creaks beneath your weight, Waves lap gently against the hull, and the distant murmur of the crew blends with the rhythmic cries of gulls. You feel the day winding down, a slow, deliberate exhalation of light, scent, and motion. You lean back, letting the ship's gentle sway cradle your body, and allow the absurd, delicate, and persistent humanity of the sailors to settle softly into your thoughts. The evening stretches lazily ahead, infinite in potential, and you let yourself drift, ready to follow the slow, reassuring heartbeat of the ocean into night. Night descends slowly, like a careful curtain being drawn across the horizon, letting only the softest strands of starlight spill through. The deck is quieter now, though the familiar sounds remain. The hush of waves, the occasional creak of ropes, the murmured conversations of men settling into the rhythms of the evening. You probably won't notice when time slips away from you. Aboard the HMS Sapphire, hours blur into the steady cadence of the sea. A lantern sways gently near the mainmast, its glow creating halos on the damp wood. Shadows stretch and twist with each shift of the ship, almost alive in their motion. You walk slowly across the deck, feeling the cool planks beneath your boots, aware of the faint scent of citrus still lingering from below. It clings to everything, like a ghost of caution and hope blended into one. The orange crate remains untouched, as if waiting for the precise moment when fear will give way to necessity. Historians still debate whether these stashed fruits were saved purely for scurvy prevention or reserved as a sort of quiet luxury, a small rebellion against endless salted meat and hard biscuit. A whimsical ritual comes to mind. Some sailors swore that touching an orange before sunrise would invite misfortune. It's unclear where the belief began, but you imagine men creeping past the crate with theatrical solemnity, avoiding even accidental brushes against the forbidden fruit. You smile softly at the absurdity and admire the persistence of human superstition, especially when wrapped around something as seemingly harmless as citrus. The cook, undeterred by myths, works silently below deck, slicing limes with deliberate precision. You hear his humming faintly rising through the boards, a tune at once cheerful and haunting, something that could have been carried across oceans and decades. The scent drifts upward, mingling with the salt-heavy breeze, and it's oddly comforting, as though citrus itself has become the ship's quiet anthem. You lean against the railing, gazing out at the black expanse of sea stretching endlessly in every direction. The waves glint faintly under starlight, tiny silver fractures in a vast unbroken darkness. Above you, the sails billow softly, whispering secrets you'll never quite catch. Their language older than this ship, older than even your quiet curiosity. An obscure, delightful tidbit surfaces. Sailors sometimes carve tiny initials into the rinds of lemons and set them adrift in the water, believing they'd carry messages to lost friends or faraway loves. You imagine hundreds of small yellow emissaries bobbing across the Atlantic, each one a silent wish sent to someone on another shore. Whether they reached anyone is irrelevant. The act itself feels like a soft, unspoken poetry. The gulls are silent now, replaced by the rhythmic creak of timbers and the sighing of the wind through taut ropes. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the quiet blanket you, and feel the ship's gentle rocking cradle your thoughts. The mingling of superstition, necessity, and routine wraps around you like a quilt stitched from equal parts fear and tenderness. The night is young, the stars infinite, and the orange crate below deck waits patiently, as if knowing its moment is inevitable. You breathe deeply, letting the salt air cool your lungs, and feel yourself slipping further into the measured heartbeat of the sea, where time stretches and folds like soft linen beneath starlight. The night deepens, and the deck is now bathed in silver. Moonlight pools across the planks, spilling softly over coils of rope and barrels stacked neatly along the railings. You probably won't find urgency here. The hours stretch like honey, sweet and slow, inviting you to breathe at half the pace you do on land. The HMS Sapphire rocks gently, a wooden cradle on a dark, endless sea. You hear footsteps approaching softly from behind. A sailor carrying a lantern, its glow swaying like a captured firefly. He nods briefly as he passes, his shadow stretching across the deck in elongated silence. Somewhere below you hear muffled laughter, a small rebellion against the hush of the ocean's vastness. The orange crate rests in its corner, waiting, patient and persistent, its presence somehow louder than any voice. Historians still debate whether the sailor's fear of citrus was rooted in experience or inherited caution, passed along from one voyage to the next like a family heirloom. A peculiar superstition drifts into thought. Some believed that whistling near the orange crate would summon storms. It wasn't just an idle belief. Men avoided humming and whistling altogether when passing the hold, as though silence itself could bribe the sea into calmness. You glance downward, half expecting the crate to whisper back in agreement. The cook, immune to caution, continues his lime-slicing duties below deck. His humming grows clearer now, rising with the steam of simmering broth and the sharp scent of citrus oils. The fragrance reaches you on the upper deck, threaded delicately into the salt air, a reminder that fear and sustenance often come from the same place. Near the bow, two sailors lean against the railing, sharing a quiet conversation you can't hear. One gestures vaguely toward the horizon while the other nods, his hand resting on a small wooden charm dangling from his belt. A fish carved crudely, worn smooth from years of superstitious handling. You imagine the comfort it brings, not because it works, but because belief itself can steady the mind when the sea refuses to. A small, strange custom surfaces. Sailors sometimes floated hollowed citrus peels in buckets of fresh water, believing it purified the supply. Whether it worked or not, no one knows, but the buckets, glowing faintly under moonlight, must have looked like tiny lanterns of gold. You picture them bobbing gently, small silent prayers against an indifferent ocean. The breeze softens, carrying faint murmurs from below deck, the creak of hammocks swaying, the whisper of cloth brushing against wood. You close your eyes, absorbing the rhythm of the sea, the swaying ship, the sighing ropes, the faint citrus carried on the night air. Above, stars scatter endlessly, tiny pinpricks of light strung across infinity. For a moment, time dissolves entirely. There is no before, no after, just this. The quiet hum of life aboard the Sapphire, the orange crate dreaming below, the strange comfort of rituals and whispers that keep fear manageable. You lean into the railing, feeling the polished grain under your fingertips, and let the ocean's slow heartbeat carry you deeper into the night. Morning comes softly, as though the sun itself hesitates before touching the horizon. The sky spills open in pale strokes of lavender and peach, while the sea mirrors its gentle awakening with small restless ripples. You probably won't feel rushed here. The world aboard the HMS Sapphire wakes at its own deliberate pace, the kind of rhythm land rarely remembers anymore. You rise slowly, inhaling the cool morning air. It tastes faintly of salt, wet wood, and something sweeter. The memory of citrus carried faintly from below deck. The orange crate hasn't moved, but it feels different now in the new light, like an artifact waiting to reveal its purpose. Historians still debate whether sailors dreaded touching the fruit for fear of illness or secretly hoarded it as contraband luxury, a quiet rebellion against endless dry biscuits and salted pork. A peculiar ritual surfaces with the dawn. Sailors sometimes greeted the rising sun by touching their foreheads to the mainmast, believing it would protect them for the day ahead. You watch two men pause briefly near the mast, their gestures small but deliberate, an unspoken contract between flesh and wood, hope and superstition. Breakfast on board isn't glamorous. Hardtack softened in brine, a ladle of broth, and, for the fortunate, a wedge of dried cheese that seems immune to both time and flavor. The cook's voice hums faintly from the galley, his quiet song threading through the scent of lime and boiling water. You imagine him in his small domain, slicing fruit with surgical care, the blades catching stray flecks of sunlight, his precision making this mundane act feel ceremonial. You wander toward the bow, where the horizon stretches endlessly, the ocean's surface still touched by early mist. A sailor beside you mutters softly about citrus spirits, explaining without irony that the fruit carries blessings and curses in equal measure. You glance at him, trying to read whether this is jest or doctrine, but his expression remains perfectly neutral, as though he believes every word he's just whispered. An obscure tidbit lingers in your mind. Some sailors carved elaborate patterns into the skins of lemons, turning them into tiny charms thought to repel bad weather. The carved fruit, tucked carefully into pockets or hung from belts, became small guardians against storms, illness, or worse. You picture the deck dotted with little decorated lemons, each one a talisman in disguise, absurd yet oddly poetic. The wind shifts slightly, catching the sails and pulling the ship forward with soft authority. The ropes hum faintly under tension, their vibrations a quiet song shared between timber and wind. You rest your hand on the railing, tracing the worn grain polished smooth by years of touch, each groove telling its own quiet story. Somewhere below deck, a burst of laughter rises before dissolving back into the hum of activity. The fruit crate waits silently in its shadowed corner, an unsolved riddle wrapped in waxy skin and speculation. You take one last look at the calm sea, inhale deeply, and let the warm, honey-colored light soak into your skin. Morning stretches out before you like an open page, its meaning yet unwritten, its edges softened by salt and sun. By midday, the heat has settled comfortably over the deck, pressing warmth into the planks and coaxing salt to bloom faintly on their surface. The air hums with quiet energy, the soft clatter of tools, the low murmur of sailors at work, and the occasional creak of the rigging above. You probably won't find urgency here either. The HMS Sapphire moves steadily, as though the ship itself has decided that haste would be an act of bad manners. You sit near the railing, letting the warm wood cradle your back while the ocean stretches in unbroken blue beneath an almost blinding sky. The orange crate remains untouched, its contents both temptation and threat depending on which sailor you ask. Historians still debate whether the crate represented safety, a weapon against scurvy, or silent danger, a reminder that spoilage was always a lurking enemy. A curious midday ritual takes shape before you. A sailor dips a lime wedge into seawater before chewing it slowly, convinced the combination unlocks a kind of hidden energy. You watch him grimace through the tart saltiness and marvel at the resilience of human invention in the face of monotony. It doesn't look enjoyable, but his confidence makes you wonder if maybe the taste itself is the point. Something vivid enough to remind him he is alive. The cook passes you briefly, carrying a small net filled with citrus peels destined for disposal. He pauses, smiles faintly, and tosses one overboard, watching it spin briefly before vanishing into the waves. You ask him why, and he replies casually that fruit skins confuse the sea spirits, preventing them from following the ship. You decide not to ask further questions. Some mysteries are better savored, not solved. A subtle detail catches your attention. A length of rope near the mast has tiny dried lime rinds tied into its fibers, knotted carefully as though they serve a hidden purpose. You lean closer and run your fingers gently over the texture, sensing a story braided invisibly into the rigging. This is not in any logbook. This is quiet folklore written in salt and string. An obscure tidbit emerges. Sailors once believed that peeling an orange counterclockwise brought good fortune, while clockwise peeling guaranteed storms. The absurdity of such precision somehow makes it feel more sacred, as though survival depends on small invisible bargains struck with the cosmos. You picture the galley filled with men slowly rotating fruit like miniature planets, each turn a silent negotiation with fate. The sun climbs higher, scattering diamonds across the sea's surface, each sparkle blinding for just a heartbeat before dissolving into endless blue. You let your gaze soften, allowing the movement of water and light to blur together, a soothing kaleidoscope without edges or urgency. Somewhere, faint laughter drifts again from below deck, mingling with the creak of hammocks and the quiet scratching of a quill recording another day at sea. The ship hums gently beneath you, an orchestra of wood, rope and wind, each sound layered seamlessly over the next. You close your eyes briefly, letting the warmth seep into your skin, and realize how the day carries you forward without demand or effort, like a tide that knows exactly where it wants you to go. The afternoon stretches slowly, heat pressing softly against your skin while the gentle rocking of the HMS Sapphire reminds you that the world aboard this ship is measured in subtle, unhurried moments. You probably won't be thinking about anything urgent. The horizon, unbroken and unrelenting, is enough to keep your thoughts drifting lazily from one detail to the next. The orange crate below deck continues to hum its silent, forbidden promise, a bright, citrus-scented heartbeat against the endless blue. A sailor leans against the mast, polishing a brass fitting until it shines like molten gold. You watch the reflection of sunlight ripple over the deck and wonder at the patient persistence of men who care for such small details while surrounded by vast, indifferent water. You remember the lime peels chewed to prevent scurvy, the tiny rituals and charms tucked into pockets and ropes. Everything a quiet testament to the human desire to assert control over life, even when the ocean refuses to obey. Historians still debate whether these small acts were protective, psychological, or simply a way to stave off madness during long voyages. A subtle tradition drifts into your mind. Sailors often carried tiny coins in their boots, believing that metal close to their feet would ward off illness or bad luck. You imagine the faint jingling of coins as they walked across the deck, a soft percussion layer in the orchestra of creaking wood and flapping sails. You wander toward the railing, feeling the polished grain beneath your fingers and inhale deeply. The salt, the faint sweetness of citrus, the metallic tang of brass, all mingle into a singular aroma that seems to anchor you in this moment. The gulls circle lazily above, their calls distant but melodic, a natural commentary on human preoccupation with superstition, diet, and minor absurdities. A curious ritual surfaces. Sailors sometimes drew faces on the rinds of oranges and lemons to amuse themselves during particularly long stretches at sea. You picture the deck dotted with tiny pouting citrus heads, each staring blankly at the waves as if judging both the men and the indifferent ocean. The absurdity is comforting, a reminder that humor and imagination can thrive even in constrained and dangerous circumstances. The cook hums softly from below deck, slicing a stubborn lime with precise care. The aroma rises and mingles with the ocean breeze, carrying with it an odd mixture of caution, nostalgia, and faint delight. You lean against the railing, letting the warmth of the sun, the hum of life, and the slow rocking of the ship seep into your bones. The day stretches lazily, each sound, smell, and movement a soft lullaby against the distant, eternal call of the waves. The sun tilts toward late afternoon, casting long, lazy shadows that stretch across the deck and highlight the familiar contours of barrels, ropes, and the ever-present orange crate below. You probably won't notice the hours passing unless you actively try. The gentle rhythm of the ship and the sea bends time, softening the edges of reality. The deck hums with low activity, boots scuffing wood, ropes creaking, sails flapping softly, men humming or murmuring quietly to one another. You wander near the galley, catching a faint whiff of citrus that mingles delicately with the scent of salted meat and boiling water. The cook moves with slow, purposeful precision, slicing oranges and limes while humming a tune that feels both familiar and distant, like a dream remembered upon waking. You remember the sailors' practice of chewing lime peels to stave off scurvy. Their puckered faces a blend of necessity, ritual, and minor absurdity. Historians still debate whether such methods were effective or merely a comforting illusion in a world where illness could arrive without warning. A small, curious tradition drifts to mind. Sailors occasionally hollowed out lemons and used them as containers for tiny trinkets or notes, hidden treasures in a world otherwise governed by monotony and repetition. You imagine opening one now, reading a whispered joke or a confession meant for no eyes but the one who dared to hide it. The thought brings a faint private smile. The horizon shimmers under the late afternoon sun, waves glinting with the soft gleam of gold and silver. You run your fingers along the railing, feeling the smooth wear of decades of human hands, and let your mind drift with the gentle rocking of the ship. There's a quiet poetry here, in the mundane acts of care, superstition, and creativity that make life aboard a vessel at sea so strangely alive. And obscure ritual surfaces. Some sailors believe that tying a small piece of citrus peel to a rope would protect it from fraying or snapping during storms. You picture men carefully knotting tiny rinds into the fibers, the absurdity softened by the delicate logic of survival at sea. The scent of citrus mingles with the salt and wood, creating an aromatic lullaby that seeps into your senses. Above, gulls circle lazily, their wings cutting soft arcs through the sun-dappled sky. You watch them drift effortlessly, a sharp contrast to the precise, cautious movements of the crew below. Their calls echo faintly, almost playfully, as if commenting on the careful choreography of human life aboard the Sapphire. The ship rocks gently beneath you, a soft cradle on an infinite, indifferent ocean. You lean against the railing, letting the warmth of the sun, the scent of citrus, and the hum of activity settle into your bones. The hours stretch lazily, each moment a quiet meditation on life, superstition, and the small persistent pleasures that keep humans afloat, even when surrounded by endless blue. The light begins to soften, a gentle amber spilling across the deck and highlighting every grain of the polished wood beneath your fingers. You probably won't feel the need to move quickly. The ship and sea have taught patience in ways that land cannot. Each subtle sway, each sigh of rope and timber, orchestrates a quiet rhythm that is almost hypnotic. The orange crate rests silently below deck, an unspoken promise. A tiny repository of both fear and hope. A sailor leans against the railing, absently polishing a brass fitting, his attention divided between the task and the horizon that stretches endlessly in all directions. The smell of citrus drifts faintly from below, mingling with salt and wood polish, creating an invisible symphony that anchors you to the moment. Chewing lime peels to stave off scurvy might have seemed mundane or absurd, yet you sense the ritual's quiet efficacy, a testament to human ingenuity mingled with superstition. Historians still debate whether the efficacy was biological or simply psychological, a trick of will against the ever-present threat of disease. A peculiar ritual comes to mind. Sailors sometimes wrote riddles or jokes on scraps of sailcloth and tucked them inside hollowed oranges, sharing small amusements with one another in the monotony of the voyage. You imagine peeling one open, discovering a joke long forgotten, and smiling quietly at the continuity of human humor across centuries. The cook hums a low tune from below deck, slicing citrus with surgical precision, the fragrance curling upward through the planks and inviting you into the domestic poetry of ship life. The sun touches the horizon lightly, painting everything with the faintest brushstrokes of pink and gold, as if the day itself is preparing to exhale. An obscure custom drifts into your awareness. Sailors sometimes placed a lemon under their pillow to ward off nightmares about illness or storms. You imagine dozens of small citrus guardians tucked beneath rough cloths, each silently protecting the dreams of men far from home. It's an absurdity, yes, but one softened by care and intention, a touch of human warmth against the indifferent vastness of the Atlantic. The gulls circle overhead, their cries fading as the light deepens. You lean against the railing, letting your hand trace the smooth grain of the wood, feeling a connection that is both immediate and timeless. The ship rocks gently beneath your weight, a heartbeat in tune with your own. Each movement, each scent, each sound folds into the next, creating a slow, immersive lullaby of life, superstition, and quiet perseverance. Evening deepens, the sky shifting into shades of violet and indigo as the sun retreats beyond the horizon. You probably won't need artificial light just yet. The fading glow of the sky paints everything in gentle contrasts, softening the harsh edges of wood and rope. The orange crate below deck rests like a patient sentinel, its hidden contents a silent promise of flavor, fear, and survival. You wander toward the mainmast, noticing how the ropes hum faintly under the pull of the sails, a delicate music created by tension, salt, and wind. Sailors move about in slow, deliberate choreography, each action imbued with necessity, habit, or ritual. Chewing lime peels, polishing brass, tying knots with care, these small gestures feel like the heartbeat of life aboard the Sapphire. Historians still debate whether such rituals were protective measures, morale boosters, or simply a means of keeping the men occupied during endless stretches of monotony. A curious tradition surfaces. Sailors sometimes carved intricate designs into the skins of citrus fruit, believing that the carved patterns could influence the weather or protect them from misfortune. You imagine a small array of oranges and lemons, each marked with delicate symbols, glowing faintly in the twilight, the absurdity of the practice softened by its poetic charm. The cook's low hum rises again, joined by the faint clang of a bucket being set aside. You catch the mingling sense of citrus, salted meat, and the faint tang of iron from the rigging, a combination that feels strangely grounding, an invisible tether to the reality of life at sea. You trace your fingers along the railing, noticing the grooves polished smooth by decades of human hands, feeling the continuity of countless sailors who have leaned here before you. An obscure ritual drifts to mind. Sailors sometimes chewed a piece of orange peel while walking along the deck, convinced it brought clarity and alertness in the subtle hazards of navigation. You watch a few men doing precisely that, their puckered expressions both ridiculous and resolute, a quiet testament to human adaptability and superstition. The sea is calm now, the occasional ripple catching starlight and casting faint reflections across the deck. Gulls have retreated, leaving only the gentle hum of sails, the faint creak of ropes, and the distant murmur of the crew preparing for night. You lean back against the rail, closing your eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm of the ship, the faint aroma of citrus, and the slow cadence of human life lull you into quiet reflection. The orange crate below deck waits in shadow, a quiet, fragrant anchor amid the infinite expanse of water. You inhale deeply, letting the scents, sounds, and gentle rocking of the ship settle into your bones. Time here feels elastic, stretching and bending, measured not by clocks but by rituals, superstition, and the unhurried passage of waves. You feel the day's warmth slowly dissipating, replaced by the gentle promise of night, and allow yourself to drift with the ship, carried forward by the soft heartbeat of life at sea. Night descends with a slow, deliberate grace, folding the deck into gentle shadows. You probably won't feel any urgency. The horizon is a soft, unbroken canvas of deep blue and silver, and the ship rocks steadily beneath your feet. The orange crate below deck rests quietly, its presence both reassuring and vaguely ominous, a reminder that even small comforts come with their own rules. A sailor adjusts the rigging, his hands moving with patient precision, and you watch the way his fingers find each knot with intimate familiarity. The scent of citrus drifts faintly from the galley, mingling with salt and the lingering aroma of polished wood. Chewing lime peels is a ritual, a small bulwark against scurvy, monotony, and perhaps the darker corners of a sailor's imagination. Historians still debate whether the efficacy of these measures was real or simply a psychological comfort, a way to give men agency in a world that offers little. A small peculiar custom drifts into your thoughts. Sailors occasionally whispered secrets to their oranges, as though the fruit could absorb worry and misfortune alike. You imagine dozens of men murmuring quietly to the rinds, sharing jokes, laments, and hopes in a language only partially understood by themselves. It is absurd, yes, but the absurdity has its own quiet poetry. The cook hums below deck, slicing a stubborn lime with deliberate care. You catch the faintest glimmer of reflected moonlight on the blade, a small spark of brightness in the muted shadows. Above, the sails hum faintly with the wind, and the creak of timbers under tension forms a steady, comforting cadence. The gulls have vanished, leaving only the whispers of water against hull, rope against wood, and the occasional laugh from below deck. An obscure ritual surfaces. Sailors sometimes hid small charms inside hollowed fruit, believing it would protect the crew from storms or misfortune. You imagine a dozen tiny talismans bobbing in baskets or pockets, absurd and delicate, a human imprint on a vast, indifferent ocean. You lean against the railing, fingers tracing the polished wood, feeling the continuity of countless sailors who have performed similar gestures over centuries. The moon rises slowly, casting a silver glow across the deck, highlighting every rope, barrel, and plank with gentle clarity. You take a deep breath, letting the salt air and faint citrus fragrance settle in your lungs. The ship rocks steadily beneath you, a wooden heartbeat in tune with your own. Time seems to blur, folding in on itself, measured not in hours but in rituals, sounds, and the patient rhythm of the waves. The night is complete now, a rich tapestry of deep blues and silvers punctuated by the faint glimmer of stars. You probably won't feel the rush of land, schedules, or obligations. Aboard the HMS Sapphire, the world is measured by the subtle rhythms of human activity and oceanic motion. The orange crate below deck rests in shadow, fragrant, waiting. A reminder that survival, superstition, and curiosity often share the same space. You wander near the mainmast, fingers brushing the rough-hewn rope, noting the smooth grooves polished by countless hands before yours. Sailors move quietly across the deck, each absorbed in their own rituals, checking knots, whispering quietly, humming tunes, or chewing lime peels with puckered determination. These small actions anchor the crew to life aboard the ship, blending necessity with superstition, routine with imagination. Historians still debate whether these rituals were protective, practical, or purely a means of sustaining morale. A curious practice drifts into your mind. Sailors sometimes painted tiny eyes on citrus rinds to ward off evil spirits or simply amuse themselves. You imagine a dozen small, bright-faced oranges and lemons dangling in netting or tucked into pockets, silently observing the world around them with absurd authority. The cook hums softly from below deck, the gentle chopping of citrus blending seamlessly with the subtle creak of timbers and the distant rhythm of waves. You inhale deeply, the mingling scents of salt, citrus, and polished wood forming a strangely comforting lullaby. There is humor here, quiet and understated, in men negotiating with superstition and survival, finding solace in rituals that feel as old as the sea itself. An obscure tidbit surfaces. Some sailors believe that peeling citrus in a particular sequence, clockwise or counterclockwise, would influence the wind as favor. You picture the crew moving carefully, hands puckered around fruit, negotiating fortune with the precision of artists performing invisible dances. The absurdity is softened by sincerity, the ritual rendered beautiful by its commitment. Above, the stars reflect faintly on the waves, casting silver threads across the dark water. The gulls are silent now, the deck almost entirely still, save for occasional whispers and the creak of ropes in wind. You lean against the railing, letting your hand trace the smooth grain, feeling centuries of human presence embedded in each groove. The orange crate waits below deck, patient and fragrant. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the gentle rocking of the ship, the hum of life aboard, and the lullaby of sea, wind, and superstition settle deeply into your senses. Time blurs into rhythm, ritual, and quiet absurdity, each element folding gently into the next, guiding you into a slow, peaceful contemplation of life afloat in this vast, indifferent ocean. The night stretches on deep and undisturbed, a velvet curtain punctuated by the faint shimmer of stars and the reflective glint of moonlight across gentle waves. You probably won't feel urgency here. The ship has its own rhythm, and you are invited to follow it, slow and deliberate. The orange crate below deck rests like a quiet sentinel, a fragrant mixture of promise and caution, waiting for a day that might never rush it. You walk along the deck, noticing the subtle, constant hum of the ship's timbers flexing under wind and wave. Sailors move quietly, their task performed with careful deliberation, coiling ropes, checking knots, polishing brass fittings until they gleam faintly under the moonlight. Chewing lime peels to prevent scurvy is both ritual and survival, an odd blend of necessity and superstition. Historians still debate whether the practice was genuinely protective or primarily a psychological comfort against long stretches of uncertainty. A peculiar practice drifts into your thoughts. Sailors sometimes left small carved figures inside hollowed citrus, believing they would ward off storms or protect the crew's dreams. You imagine a dozen tiny guardians bobbing gently in baskets or tucked into corners, absurd yet poetic, comforting in their silent vigilance. The cook's faint hum rises from below deck, joined by the soft slap of waves against the hull and the whisper of wind through taut ropes. You inhale deeply, the scent of citrus mingling with the briny air, grounding you in this suspended reality. You notice a faint glow on the horizon, subtle, as if the sun itself is stretching into consciousness, preparing to rise without haste or fanfare. An obscure tidbit comes to mind. Sailors occasionally tied strips of citrus peel into their hair to ward off imagined spirits of illness. You smile faintly at the image of a deck full of men moving deliberately, little curls of citrus dangling from their hair like fragrant charms. The absurdity is softened by intent. The action is protective, whimsical, and human. The gulls remain silent, leaving only the soft rhythm of life aboard the Sapphire. You lean against the railing, tracing its worn grain with your fingers, feeling centuries of hands and stories embedded in the wood. The orange crate waits below, patient and silent, a repository of flavor, fear, and ritual. The gentle rocking of the ship combined with the quiet smells and subtle sounds begins to weave a lullaby that moves through your senses, threading calm and contemplation into each breath. The first hint of dawn tints the horizon in pale blushes of pink and gold, spreading slowly across the infinite expanse of sea. You probably won't feel the rush of land, clocks, or human expectation. Aboard the HMS Sapphire, the world unfolds in its own measured pace. The orange crate below deck glows faintly in your imagination, fragrant and forbidden, a reminder that even the smallest objects hold disproportionate significance at sea. You wander toward the mainmast, fingers brushing against familiar worn ropes, tracing the grooves polished smooth by generations of sailors. The ship hums with gentle activity. Boots scuff the planks, sails flutter softly, and murmurs rise from the crew below deck. Lime peels are chewed with puckered intensity, brass polished with care, knots inspected and re-inspected. Each act, trivial in isolation, forms the quiet heartbeat of life aboard the vessel. Historians still debate whether such rituals were protective measures or simply methods to occupy the mind during endless stretches of monotony. A curious superstition drifts into thought. Sailors sometimes painted tiny eyes on citrus rinds to scare away evil spirits. You imagine a line of oranges and lemons, each watching silently, absurdly, like miniature wardens against fate itself. The cook hums faintly, slicing citrus with steady precision. The aroma rises through the deck boards, mingling with salt, wood, and the soft perfume of the ocean. You watch the sunlight inch higher, reflecting off polished brass and gently rippling waves. It's a slow, gentle illumination that doesn't demand attention, but invites contemplation. An obscure tidbit surfaces. Sailors believed peeling fruit in a specific order could influence wind or weather conditions. You imagine men with puckered faces turning oranges and lemons carefully, negotiating invisible agreements with the sea. The ritual, while ridiculous, carries a kind of quiet gravitas, a testament to the persistent creativity of humans confronted with the unpredictable. The gulls circle lazily above, their wings slicing arcs through the morning haze. The deck creaks gently beneath your feet as you trace the familiar paths worn smooth by decades of movement. Below, the crew murmurs softly, blending with the hum of wind and water. The orange crate rests patiently in its shadowed corner, fragrant and enigmatic. You lean against the railing, letting the ship's gentle motion lull your senses, inhaling the mingled scents of salt, citrus, and polished timber. The rising sun paints the water with soft glimmers, and you feel yourself folding seamlessly into the slow, meditative rhythm of life aboard the Sapphire, ready to drift with the ocean and its patient, gentle cadence. The sun rises higher now, gilding the deck in muted gold. You probably won't notice the passage of hours. Aboard the HMS Sapphire, time is measured not by clocks but by wind, water, and the gentle sway of the hull. The orange crate below deck sits silently, its contents fragrant and mysterious, a curious blend of sustenance and superstition. You walk slowly across the deck, feeling the polished wood beneath your fingers, tracing its grooves and scratches, each mark a story left behind by sailors long gone. The smell of citrus drifts faintly from below deck, mingling with salt and the subtle warmth of sun-baked timber. Chewing lime peels remains a ritual, a delicate balance between necessity and superstition. Historians still debate whether such practices prevented disease, or whether they simply offered men a sense of control in a world where illness arrived unpredictably. A whimsical custom floats into your mind. Sailors sometimes tied tiny coins into their rope coils for luck, jingling faintly with each motion. You imagine the sound, soft metallic percussion interwoven with the creak of ropes and the low hum of the wind, and feel an odd comfort in the continuity of such rituals. The cook's humming rises from below deck, faint and cheerful, punctuated by the gentle chopping of citrus. The aroma drifts upward, curling around the sails and reaching the nose of every sailor on deck. A fragrant reminder that even life at sea can carry small sensory joys. An obscure tidbit surfaces. Sailors occasionally carved initials or tiny images into orange and lemon rinds, tucking them away as personal talismans or keepsakes for loved ones far away. You picture the small pocked fruit resting in hidden corners, silent witnesses to human longing and superstition. The gulls circle lazily above, their cries fading as they glide effortlessly over the waves. You lean against the railing, feeling the subtle warmth of the sun, the gentle sway of the ship, and the faint perfume of citrus and salt. Every creak, whistle, and sigh of the vessel forms a quiet symphony, and you allow yourself to sink fully into the lullaby of life aboard, carried gently by wind, water, and human ritual. The afternoon wanes, soft shadows stretching across the deck, blending with the muted glow of sunlit wood. You probably won't find urgency here. The ship and sea follow their own rhythm, and you are invited to move in quiet synchrony. The orange crate below deck rests patiently, its contents fragrant and potent, a tiny island of life amid endless water. You walk toward the bow, feeling the warmth of sun-soaked planks beneath your feet and inhaling the mingled scents of salt, citrus, and faintly oiled timber. Sailors move in slow, deliberate rhythms, adjusting sails, coiling ropes, inspecting knots. Lime peels are chewed with puckered determination, brass fittings polished, and charts consulted quietly. Historians still debate whether these rituals served practical purposes or whether they existed as a subtle mechanism to preserve morale and stave off the creeping monotony of long voyages. A curious superstition floats into thought. Sailors believed that hollowed-out citrus could serve as secret vessels for tiny charms, protecting the crew from storms and illness. You imagine a dozen small oranges and lemons tucked away in pockets or hidden corners, absurdly yet beautifully guarding human life with silent diligence. The cook hums faintly below deck, slicing citrus with care, sending aromatic waves upward that mingle seamlessly with the salty breeze. You notice a faint shimmer across the water, where sunlight meets small waves, glimmering like scattered gems. It is a slow, gentle display, unobtrusive yet mesmerizing, an invitation to pause and simply observe. An obscure tidbit surfaces. Sailors sometimes placed a thin strip of citrus peel under their pillow to keep nightmares away, particularly those about illness or storms. You imagine dozens of men asleep, each protected by their own fragrant, absurd charm. The humor and devotion of these rituals blend seamlessly with necessity, forming a comforting, almost poetic backdrop to the life aboard ship. Above, gulls circle lazily in the soft light, their wings slicing arcs across the pale sky. The deck hums softly beneath your feet, each creak and whisper of wood contributing to a gentle rhythm that seems to pulse with the ocean itself. You lean against the railing, inhaling deeply, and let the warmth, fragrance, and sway of the vessel settle into your bones. Time stretches thin, measured in rituals, scent, and gentle motion, and you feel yourself folding effortlessly into the quiet, meditative rhythm of life aboard the Sapphire, carried gently by wind and water toward evening. The evening drifts in slowly, soft shadows stretching across the deck as the sun dips toward the horizon, painting everything in muted amber and gold. You probably won't feel the urgency of land or clocks. Aboard the HMS Sapphire, the world moves at its own measured, patient rhythm. The orange crate below deck sits quietly, a fragrant reminder of survival, superstition, and minor absurdities that keep life afloat in an endless expanse of water. You wander near the mainmast, fingers tracing the worn rope, polished smooth by generations of hands. Sailors move around you in quiet choreography, checking knots, adjusting sails, chewing lime peels, polishing brass fittings. Each action is simultaneously functional and ritualistic, a delicate balance of practicality and superstition. Historians still debate whether these small routines were genuinely protective or largely psychological, providing a sense of order in an otherwise chaotic environment. A curious superstition drifts to mind. Sailors occasionally hid tiny charms or tokens inside hollowed citrus, believing they could ward off storms or protect the crew. You imagine a dozen tiny guardians bobbing in baskets, tucked into corners or hanging from belts, absurd yet comforting in their silent vigilance. The cook hums softly below deck, slicing oranges with meticulous care. The fragrance rises, curling around the sails, threading into the briny air like invisible threads, pulling you gently toward contemplation. You watch the last of the sun's light glimmer on the waves, tiny reflections breaking across the darkening sea, and obscure tidbit surfaces. Some sailors chewed lime peels while walking the deck to maintain alertness, convinced the tart, sharp taste sharpened both body and mind. You picture a line of men, puckered and deliberate, each turn of the peel a private ceremony, blending survival, humor, and ritual. The gulls circle above lazily, their cries fading as the horizon swallows the final traces of sunlight. You lean against the railing, letting the warmth, fragrance, and gentle rocking of the ship seep into your senses. Each creak, each sigh of timber and rope, each faint, persistent aroma forms a slow, immersive lullaby. The day folds softly into night, carried by the quiet pulse of the ship, the whispers of superstition, and the enduring subtle poetry of life at sea. Night settles fully, a blanket of deep indigo scattered with delicate points of starlight. You probably won't notice the passage of hours here. Aboard the HMS Sapphire, time is measured not in minutes, but in motion, ritual, and the quiet rhythm of human life. The orange crate below deck rests silently, fragrant and mysterious, an object both feared and treasured, a touchstone of routine and superstition. You wander slowly across the deck, tracing grooves worn smooth by decades of sailors' hands, inhaling the mingled scents of citrus, salt, and polished timber. Sailors move quietly, performing familiar tasks, adjusting sails, checking knots, chewing lime peels with puckered diligence. Each act blends necessity, superstition, and habit, forming the subtle heartbeat of life aboard the vessel. Historians still debate whether these rituals were protective, psychological, or both. A whimsical custom drifts into your mind. Sailors sometimes carve tiny faces into citrus rinds, believing they could ward off misfortune or amuse themselves during long stretches at sea. You imagine the deck dotted with pouting oranges and lemons, small fragrant witnesses to human hope, fear, and creativity. The cook hums softly from below deck, slicing citrus with precision, sending delicate aromas upward that mingle seamlessly with the salty breeze. You watch the stars reflected faintly on the waves, glimmers like silver scattered over a dark, endless quilt. It is a slow, gentle spectacle, unhurried and unobtrusive, inviting contemplation and calm. An obscure tidbit surfaces. Sailors occasionally tucked citrus peels beneath their pillows to keep nightmares away, especially those about illness or storms. You imagine dozens of men asleep, protected by absurd yet tender charms, the humor of the ritual softened by care and intention. The gulls have vanished into the night, leaving only the creak of timbers, the whisper of ropes in wind, and the distant hum of the crew. You lean against the railing, letting the ship's gentle sway cradle you, the lingering scent of citrus and salt carrying a strange, subtle comfort. The orange crate rests below deck, patient and fragrant, a quiet emblem of survival and ritual. Time stretches thin, measured not in hours but in rhythm, scent, and soft, persistent human gestures, guiding you deeper into the immersive, meditative cadence of life aboard the Sapphire. The early hours of the night are quiet now, with only the faint hum of wind through the rigging and the gentle lap of waves against the hull. You probably won't feel the pressure of urgency. The HMS Sapphire drifts in its own deliberate rhythm, a vast rolling sanctuary of salt and wood. The orange crate below deck waits in its shadowed corner, a mysterious mixture of scent, superstition, and sustenance, patiently holding its secrets. You wander toward the bow, fingers brushing along the worn planks, feeling the history pressed into each groove. Sailors move quietly, adjusting sails, checking knots, polishing brass, chewing lime peels to stave off scurvy, each action blending survival with ritual. Historians still debate whether these routines were genuinely preventative or largely psychological, offering men a fragile sense of control over an unpredictable ocean. A curious superstition drifts through your thoughts. Sailors sometimes tied small pieces of citrus peel to ropes to protect them from fraying, a subtle, fragrant charm against the wear and tear of life at sea. You imagine the tiny strips swinging gently, catching faint moonlight, absurd yet undeniably human in their quiet intention. The cook hums softly below deck, slicing citrus with careful precision. The aroma rises and mingles with the salt air, threading gently through the deck and mingling with the muted warmth of moonlight. You notice a subtle shimmer on the water, the waves reflecting stars in tiny fleeting patterns, each one a soft punctuation to the rhythm of the night. An obscure tidbit surfaces. Sailors sometimes drew tiny faces on citrus, believing the fruit would absorb bad luck or misfortune. You picture dozens of small, bright-faced guardians dangling in nets or tucked into corners, silent witnesses to human humor, superstition, and creativity. The gulls have disappeared entirely, leaving only the creak of timbers and the whisper of wind. You lean against the railing, letting the gentle rocking of the ship cradle you, the scent of citrus lingering softly in the air. Each sound, movement, and subtle aroma folds into the next, forming a slow, immersive lullaby of human life at sea. The orange crate below deck, a quiet emblem of ritual, caution, and tiny delights. The night deepens further, soft shadows stretching across the deck, mingling with the silver glow of the moon. You probably won't feel the pull of schedules or land. The ocean and the HMS Sapphire maintain a steady, patient rhythm that guides your body and mind towards stillness. The orange crate below deck remains untouched, its fragrant promise a small anchor in the vast, undulating expanse of sea. You walk slowly across the deck, running your fingers along the polished wood, the grooves worn smooth by countless hands over decades. Sailors move quietly, adjusting sails, checking knots, polishing brass fittings, chewing lime peels with puckered determination. These small rituals form the subtle heartbeat of life aboard, blending necessity, superstition, and routine. Historians still debate whether these acts were protective, purely psychological, or a delicate combination of both. A whimsical superstition drifts into your awareness. Sailors sometimes tuck tiny charms or carve citrus rinds into their clothing, convinced it would protect them from storms or illness. You imagine dozens of small talismans swaying gently with each movement, absurd yet tender in their silent guardianship. The cook hums softly from below deck, slicing citrus with deliberate care. The aroma rises, weaving itself into the cool night air, mingling with the scent of salt and the faint warmth of polished wood. You notice the stars reflected in the undulating water, flickering faintly as if winking at you, a gentle reminder that life continues quietly beyond human intention. An obscure tidbit surfaces. Sailors occasionally peeled citrus in a specific order, convinced it influenced the favor of the wind or the outcome of the day's tasks. You picture men turning fruit carefully, puckered and focused, negotiating invisible bargains with the ocean. The absurdity of it is softened by ritual and devotion, a subtle poetry of survival at sea. The gulls are silent now, leaving only the gentle creak of timbers and the soft sigh of ropes in wind. You lean against the railing, letting the ship's slow rocking cradle your thoughts, the mingling scent of citrus and salt a quiet balm. The orange crate waits below deck, patient and fragrant, emblematic of survival, superstition, and the small comforts that thread through human life even on a vast, indifferent ocean. The night lingers, deep and soft, with only the subtle shimmer of stars reflected on the gentle waves. You probably won't feel any urgency. Aboard the HMS Sapphire, time drifts, measured in the rhythmic rocking of the hull, the creak of ropes, and the distant hum of life below deck. The orange crate waits patiently in shadow, fragrant and mysterious, a small repository of sustenance, superstition, and human hope. You wander along the deck, fingers brushing over the polished wood, tracing grooves worn smooth by countless sailors' hands over decades. Sailors move quietly, performing familiar tasks, adjusting sails, inspecting knots, chewing lime peels to stave off scurvy, polishing brass fittings. Each act blends utility, ritual, and subtle superstition. Historians still debate whether these routines were protective, psychological, or some graceful combination of both. A curious superstition drifts into your mind. Sailors occasionally tuck tiny citrus charms into hammocks or belts, believing they offered protection from storms or illness. You imagine dozens of small, fragrant guardians silently observing the ebb and flow of life aboard, absurd yet tender in their quiet vigilance. The cook hums softly below deck, slicing citrus with careful precision. The aroma drifts upward, mingling seamlessly with salt and the soft night air. You watch the horizon, a faint glimmer of dawn teasing the edge, and realize that time has folded softly into itself, measured in smells, sounds, and the gentle sway of the ship. An obscure tidbit surfaces. Sailors sometimes left tiny carved faces on citrus rinds to amuse themselves or perhaps ward off bad luck. You imagine these small pouting guardians scattered across the ship, each holding silent stories of humor, longing, and superstition, invisible yet persistent witnesses to human life afloat. Dawn arrives slowly, brushing the sea and deck with delicate hues of lavender, peach, and gold. You probably won't feel any hurry. The ship and ocean move in a patient, eternal rhythm, and you are invited to drift in time with them. The orange crate below deck rests quietly, its fragrant presence a gentle reminder that life, even in miniature, carries both ritual and sustenance, humor and superstition. You walk along the deck one final time, noticing the subtle warmth of sun-baked planks beneath your fingers, inhaling the mingled scents of salt, citrus, and polished timber. Sailors move quietly, performing small tasks with gentle care, checking knots, polishing brass, chewing lime peels with puckered resolve. Historians still debate the precise effectiveness of these routines, but their purpose as a soft anchor of habit and reassurance is undeniable. A small whimsical custom surfaces. Sailors sometimes tucked citrus peels under their pillows to ward off nightmares, believing the fruit could absorb fears and bad luck. You picture the crew asleep in hammocks, fragrant little talismans tucked close, their absurdity softened by intention and care. The gulls circle lazily above, their cries faint, blending with the hum of the ship and the whisper of the wind through sails and ropes. Below deck, the cook hums quietly, slicing citrus with precise, gentle rhythm. The aroma drifts upward, mingling with the ocean air, creating a delicate, fragrant tapestry. The orange crate, patient and silent, rests as a quiet emblem of human persistence, ingenuity, and the strange comfort of ritual in a vast, indifferent world. Now let yourself settle fully into the gentle cadence of the sapphire. Feel the rocking of the ship beneath you, the soft warmth of sun and timber, the mingling scent of salt and citrus seeping into your senses. Let your thoughts drift like the waves, each sound, each sigh of wind, each distant hum of life folding into the next. The gulls are gone, the horizon stretches endlessly, and time itself seems to dissolve into rhythm, fragrance, and quiet ritual. Allow the scent of oranges and the hum of the ocean to carry you softly, gently into calm, letting the slow, immersive heartbeat of the sea lull you into rest, the world shrinking to the gentle, patient sway of ship, wind, and water, and your mind floating lightly on this quiet, endless ocean of time.